What cultural shift happened without people noticing? Freely giving up your personal information, email, name, occupation, and fingerprints for starters. These giant corporations like Facebook, Google, and Apple have it all and we willingly give it to them for the most part. Close friend is a doctor. His answer surprised me. How long it takes people to die nowadays. He was telling me about treating gunshot victims and injuries from horrible car crashes. He didn't seem fazed by it. I was kind of WTF, and his big WTF was how long we can keep people alive. How in many cases, it takes people years to die. He is most disturbed by this. As he put it, when he loses a gunshot patient, he knows he did all that he could to save a life, but crap happens. Right. You've got to move on. It sucks. But there's little moral ambiguity about it. When dealing with a semi-vegetative person, the moral questions surrounding pulling the plug, continuing treatments, working with families really get to him, and there are no easy answers. This is a relatively new phenomenon in medicine. Not extending life, but prolonging death. That's what my dad says about end-of-life care after spending nearly 30 years in medicine. He also saw his mother lose her mind to Alzheimer's and his mother-in-law wither away to nothing recently. I genuinely does not want to extend his own suffering when his time comes. My GF showed me a meme earlier today. Gist was 1996. Parents say don't trust anybody or anything on the internet. Present day, parents ask if you heard about Obviously and True Thing X on Facebook today. I've seen similar ones along the lines of 1996. Parents say not to get rides from strangers or meet anyone online. 2017. Gets rides from strangers found online. The rise of the internet meme followed by its gradual acceptance into mainstream culture is also a pretty big shift that's happened in recent years. Constant availability. Used to be I'd try to call a friend and it would ring and ring and ring and they'd have no idea I was trying to reach them. Since caller it didn't exist yet, I just figured they weren't home and kept trying. These days if I left my phone to just ring and ring with no voicemail and no return call, not answering texts, people would probably start to panic and worry about me. Somehow it just became the norm to be constantly reachable no matter where you are and when it is. People don't call each other unexpectedly. It's now polite to text first, or schedule a specific time to talk on the phone. I've found this is now true even in business. People email or IM to ask if it's a good time for a call, or say please call me at your earliest convenience rather than just ringing the phone themselves. Even senior management doesn't call me on a whim. This is a really good example. Part of me wonders if it's because of how frustrating it gets to play phone tag all day. In the early 2000s, parents had mistaken belief that the internet is just for fun. Now even official gov dealings can be done only on internet. Yay, my inbox is alive. I've only had a few job interviews that took place in person. I think maybe 3, and I've gone to a frick ton. I walk into places that have a flyer and introduce myself and they tell me to go back home and apply online. My older family members think it's crazy that I don't stay to fill out an application there, but they literally don't let you. The automation of the hiring process and how it's made getting work harder. Used to be a human being would sit down and talk with you to get an idea of your hireability. Now we get multiple page personality quizzes that basically screen for how exploitable you are and give no feedback. People's independence with regard to directions. It's rare now to stop and ask someone how to get somewhere, and we tend to take GPS navigation for granted. The transition from maps to MapQuest to GPS units to smartphones which built navigation into our pockets happened so quickly. And yet people are still afraid of getting lost. I love Steve Irwin and his death was a terrible tragedy, but when he first became popular pretty much everyone expected something terrible to happen to him someday. Nature shows at the time were mostly about filming wildlife from afar without interfering. The crocodile hunter was the first guy I remember to get in and interact all close and personal, often with creatures we viewed as very dangerous. Viewers especially loved when crocs would get agitated and snap at him. He's a ridiculously charming nature lover, but everyone who watched when it first came out basically said come look at this crazy guy. He's going to get his arm bit off someday for sure. He became so popular it basically changed the format of nature shows since. Now we have tons of proud hillbilly shows wrangling snapping turtles and whatever. I remember someone saying to my dad in the late 90s that Steve would get eaten by a croc one day. My dad just said nah, a croc won't get him. He knows crocs. It'll be something else that he doesn't know as well, where he lets his guard down and gets too close. Lo and behold. Micropayments. I remember a decade ago everyone fretting how anyone would ever be able to charge just $1 for something online. Between PayPal, Amazon, app stores, and stored credit cards in browsers, no longer seems to be an issue. That and large platforms for selling almost anything anyone would want to pay small amounts of money for, software, music, written work, etc. Internet shopping is basically a digital version of those impulse buy shelves at checkouts. People dropping by to visit without notifying you they're coming. When I was a kid, it was so exciting when people came by just to say hi, and we loved it. Now, when the doorbell rings and it's not pizza, UPS, or Jimmy John's, we are pretty sure someone is there to kill us. Protesting about petrol prices. The whole of Europe was up in arms with blockades everywhere because the price was getting to £1 a litre. They went down and we'd won, then the media stopped covering it and no one gave a crap when it went way past that just a few months later. Not so long ago, the thought of test tube babies horrified people. They were lobbying to have it stopped. IVF is now an everyday thing and nobody really questions it. I think the phrase test tube baby is used to conjure thoughts of a lab filled with large cylindrical glass vats containing fetuses floating in some strange liquid, science water. Then people realized that the babies were carried to term and birthed just like any other child, and were more okay with it. The ease of being able to just look something up on the spot. The idea of going to a library or searching through books to find the answer to that random thing that's nagging at you is almost unthinkable now that we have Google and Wikipedia. I love how we can just read through entire Wikipedia entries on very specific subjects like shell structures of deep-sea radiolarians just on our phones. Or even read entire PhD theses from some university on other side of the world. Work attire slowly becoming more and more relaxed. My father is a real conservative dude in how he lives his life, dresses, etc. But frick was he thrilled when he longer had to wear a blazer, tie, and trench coat everywhere in the winter. This is actually the opposite in my profession as a mechanic. Shirts with collars, tucked in, neat belt, have to match your boots. Seems like when I started years ago you could show up in worn out Levi's and a plain white t-shirt and you'd be golden. How technology has made is so many people are never off the clock in their job, and as a result people expecting services responses immediately. It used to be you went to work and then you went home, and didn't answer messages or anything until the next morning. Because you were home, it was expected you could relax and have fun with family or friends. Unless you were a doctor or firefighter or something, you weren't expected to come into work at the drop of a hat or answer loads of calls. You weren't expected to be available to regularly correspond with your boss, colleagues or clients at all times. Now it seems it doesn't matter if you're sick with strep throat, it's Christmas Day, or you're on vacation in Italy. You are contactable and will be expected to answer any and all people you work with. And this new norm has made people get pissy if their kid's teacher, dog's walker or anyone doesn't respond to their text or email within an hour. It's kind of a vicious cycle. Update. Wow. I did not expect this post to blow up so much. I had well over 350 responses this morning. For everyone asking what I do or saying I should quit my job, set boundaries. I actually love my job. It's a pet company that more or less exists because of this phenomenon. People have to work such long hours and are so tired they can't even find time to walk their dogs. Or they are on call and suddenly realize that they'll be gone 4 more hours than planned and Sparky hasn't been let out to crap or fed since morning. My boss is a great person, very kind and understanding, is great with time off sick days, and we all treat our employees very well. He also insists we don't answer client messages after hours unless it's an immediate request or emergency. But the fact that people email and text us at all hours says something about expectations. Plus, as someone who works in a business that is in demand 365 days a year and on call from 8 AM to 8 PM, I have a keen awareness of how this phenomenon has affected people in many career types, and how it's ridiculous that our society now functions like this. Also, I think a lot of people who just offhandedly say just get another job or I wouldn't work in a job like that don't realize that some people don't have a choice. If you're hard pressed for work, you are unfortunately at the mercy of your boss and job's demands, no matter how unreasonable they may be. This is wrong. But lots of people aren't in a position to demand they be treated fairly and still keep a job they desperately need. Workplaces and companies doing their hiring with those ridiculous online application software to intake CVs and do automated keyword scanning and hoping that the hiring manager will see yours and have it stand out from the rest to have a small chance of getting the job through an interview, regardless of how actually qualified you are, when in reality most of the submitted forms and CVs aren't even considered due to the sheer volume and software algorithms, as well as hiring managers either not knowing exactly what they're looking for or already having someone they will hire but put out the job posting to waste everyone else's time. Like, really? What's worse is that even after you submit your CV, you still have to fill out all the form info that is already included in your CV so it follows the hiring company's preferred format and intake of information. It's a big time waster for almost everyone. So the only real chance one would have at getting a job is through connections, which makes it really hard if it's your first job or if you're doing a bit of a career leap switch. I just graduated from college and I wasn't told this or used to rejection. I just want an entry-level position and that's not working out to the point where I am thinking of doing grad school. We stopped letting our kids out in public unsupervised. Crime started rising in the 70s, peaked in the late 90s, and has consistently been dropping into present day. Even though we're at levels we had before the 60s, we can't imagine giving our kids the autonomy that children in the 70s had. I have an anecdote that is kind of interesting. About 10 years ago my then 5-year-old son bought several games on his mom's phone. When she saw the new games she said, "Boy's name, these games cost money." He looked at her incredulously and said, "How can you put money in a phone?" Last week my 3-year-old nieces, twins, got a Christmas card with a $20 bill in it. Excitedly, they yelled, "Mom, he got us a ticket." They had never seen cash before. When she told them it was money, they both just studied the heck out of those bills. So in less than 10 years, there was some sort of shift in the concept of money in our family. Told you it was anecdotal. That you never make a plan with someone and stick to it. My friend's dad traveled to London in his youth. Not a word of English and was met at the designated London rail station on a particular date at a particular time by his Irish speaking brother, all arranged a month before by letter. Now we just text that morning, we can't commit to a certain meeting in a month's time. Kids have sleepovers with their friends way less. I don't have kids, but after speaking with relatives and friends, apparently parents are allowing this less and less. People afraid of being accused of pedo stuff? What's the deal? Death of couch multiplayer. They can log on to XBLA from their home. The entire internet shift since 4G LTE. Like, on one hand we acknowledge it, but at the same time, we don't really fully seem to acknowledge how radically culture has shifted since LTE and smartphones put always connected internet in everyone's pocket. I mean, for one thing, people still say the internet isn't a necessity, but they haven't actually looked around in the last couple years to see that nearly half of the world we engage with requires the internet. We've become so plugged in that we don't even see the plugs anymore. It's interesting. I asked my BF what he would do that wasn't on a screen for a day, and he didn't really have an answer. I have a few slight hobbies that don't involve a screen, but I definitely couldn't keep them up all day without getting bored out of my mind. Geeks became mainstream, and with it, so did shipping, and Comic-Con. Used to be more of a weird corner of the internet. Now it's the standard. Or maybe I just think it is because it's the only place I hang out. Shipping is pretty easy now with 2-day Prime. When I was younger, it seemed like all stores commerce were closed all day on Thanksgiving and Christmas. Fast forward to the present day, seems like nearly all fast food places are open for most part of the day. Most retail places are open either Thanksgiving morning or no later than late afternoon. And most gas stations and a lot of fast food places are open on Christmas. doesn't affect most people, but the rise of the dating app is killing the gay club. Something like a quarter to a third of the gay specific clubs in the UK have closed in the last 5 years. Not because gay people, mostly guys, don't want some space occasionally, but that the not insignificant proportion of people who would only cruise and who kept these places alive outside weekend hours don't use them anymore. FaceTime. Video calls were supposed to be something from the Jetsons, and it would be so huge that we'd all have a video call phone in our homes. Then one day I realized someone was FaceTiming at the grocery store. It was just a normal thing. I rewatched Star Trek TNG and just noticed that, for the first time in my 20 years of fandom, I didn't think anything of them carrying around tablets and smartphone looking devices. Back when the show was new, this was futuristic. No paper, just digital tablets. Now I caught myself thinking, oh, those tablets look so bulky. The iPad is much smaller now. A transition to informality. People are leaving off formal practices, institutions and styles for a more casual approach to life. For example, more people are cohabitating instead of going through the hoops of marriage. Business dress codes are relaxing. Hierarchical institutions are going by the wayside, etc. With all due respect, I will always advocate cohabitation before marriage. That was how I found out my 4 years long relationship was with someone who was happy to hit me behind closed doors. The thought I would have been legally tied to the real him scares the crap out of me, and that was over 6 years ago. Screw the hoops. Safety is more important than pretenses. Work culture seems to have gotten a lot more toxic over the decades. When my parents were out of college, they got to choose between multiple great, stable jobs right out of college. Nowadays a person would be hitting the jackpot if they got a job like that off the bat. Pretty much every field I've seen has constant contract work, a lot of unpaid time, straight up doesn't hire a lot of people, or some mixture of the above. This is leading to people who will work more for less money, widening the pay gap between the top and the bottom. And it's only gonna get worse. I remember when I got an iPhone in 2007. It was not okay to look at your phone at work at all. I worked in an investment bank. It was viewed as unprofessional to have your phone out and be texting. Nowadays, it's totally acceptable to text Facebook etc. on your phone in the middle of the workday at most corporations. Heck, we used to have Facebook blocked on our work computers, but a few years ago, IT had to unblock it because so many of our small customers only have a Facebook page, not their own websites. And we just got desk phones that connect through our computers and let us text each other instead of leaving voicemail. It might not be the same in every country, but I feel like subcultures are disappearing. Back in my day you had punks, goths, hippies, skaters, jocks, emos. These days all teenagers just look so much alike. Sure, you have kids that look cooler and dress more fashionable than others, but it's all blended together and the differences have become so small. Pubes and pee sort of just started to disappear in the late 90s to where hairless or just a landing strip was the norm. It started reflecting on society too, where that also became standard. They are actually starting to make a bit of a comeback now, which is interesting. I actually had a girl apologize to me once that she wasn't clean shaved. I found that unusual. I don't think anyone's been AFK since 2010. I can't remember the last time I said be right back outside of the context of a multiplayer video game. We don't leave our instant messenger services anymore. The assumption that as time goes on, things will get worse, costs will go up, incomes will go down, product quality will decline, as if it's some inevitable law of nature. It can't have always been so. This is a big one the young take for granted and the old forgot. Expectations were in stone that you would be more successful than your parents. Yet so many things have conspired at the same time to destroy the average person financially. It feels like a miracle we ever had a chance. Technology is getting more successful at manipulating people's beliefs, desires and emotions. Corporations and campaigns are using these facilities in ways that harm the individual and the future of the country. Of the world. FTFY. The increase in flakiness. It used to be when you made plans with someone, they kept them. Now if you don't constantly check in and remind them, they will assume they no longer are invited. Forget about it. having to get quick, if not immediate, responses from people. When we had answering machines, it would be okay to leave a message and get an answer back days later. Now, if we don't hear from people for several days, we think they are dead or they hate us. Honestly, I think it should go to atheism. In the past few decades, statistically, more people have lost their religion than have become religious adherents. Something like a full quarter of the US population is now secular, and by and large we go unnoticed because we're not particularly vocal about it. I live in the southeast where people love to evangelize to try and spread the good news, but I now have more atheist friends than Christians in a deeply religious section of the United States, and we all took our own path to get to where we are. Generally speaking, I don't bring it up because I don't want potential employers judging me. But the reality remains that some of the most deeply religious regions of the country have become far more secular with the passage of religiously motivated discriminatory legislation. Halloween. It used to be a night when the streets were packed with kids. Little monsters running around everywhere. There was definite a vibe to it. It was a cultural celebration. I feel like that all started to change after 9/11, as many things in the world did. I can't quite put my hands on what year it happened or if it was a slow descent, but now you're lucky to see a handful of kids, maybe out with their parents, and the streets are dead by 7. It's like the whole world just retreated into a shell of fear and isolation. Definitely the biggest I've noticed. I'm not that old, 25, but it used to be a spectacle. I would say cell phones. Back in 2000 when I got my first one, I never knew that I would someday depend on it. Almost like an addiction, for everything in daily life. It really is a daily tool that we as a society cannot live without. One that is happening now is the death of shopping malls. The mall used to be a staple of our culture, a place where people not only shopped but also hung out and socialized. Now, malls are shutting down and the ones that are still around seem to be a shell of what they used to be. People just are not going anymore because of how easy it is to shop online instead. Where I am, this is certainly not the case. Malls have adapted and shifted to suit the consumer. Most of the major malls in Toronto are now high-end malls and sell a lot of goods people might not want to purchase online. Designer clothes and luxury items that have a more personal touch. The malls here are always packed. I mean, like lucky to find a parking spot packed. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.